Let's talk about different languages that there are available. I know when I was getting started in programming many years ago, and at other times here when I've had the opportunity to learn a new language in a sense of the computer programming world, I wish that I had had the opportunity to hear a talk like what I'm about to give, one from a veteran programmer who's seen a number of different languages and can tell me their different uses. The list of languages I'm going to go over is not going to be based on their usefulness. I'm leaving that up to you to decide because they're all useful for different things. So it depends on what you want to do. I will tell you what languages they are, kind of how they're structured a little bit. I do have some other intros on my channel too, at least if I don't have them up there yet, I soon will. Bunch of different intros to different languages as well, so you can look into them further. And but this is more in the sense of which ones are easiest to learn up at the front, and then they get harder to learn towards the back. But it's up to you what you decide you want to do. And I know don't normally talk about much in the way of Microsoft technologies, but Visual Basic is going to be the bonus one I'm going to give here, because it was just so, when you work in their Visual Studio IDE, it was very easy to learn. It had automatic statement completion, and there's just a lot of things that made that very easy to work with. So if you are on Microsoft platform, you don't have Visual Basic for anything outside of Microsoft that I'm aware of. And I've never seen it on Linux. It's something I had to give up when I went to Linux. And I do miss it. It's one of the main things that I miss about Windows. Probably one of the only things that I miss about Windows was Visual Basic's capability. And so I did want to give that there, but we're going to get into ones that are cross-platform. Most of these guys are cross-platform, or at least can be used on, almost all these can be used on Linux for sure. Let's take a look. First one up is, well, besides the Visual Studio, the Visual Basic from Visual Studio. That was one of the easier ones. And they have different languages also for that Visual Studio. But Python is next up. It is high level. It's very easy to learn. It's a beginner language. It is interpreted, so you don't have to deal with compiling it. You just type in your code into a file, save it, and then type in the name of the interpreter and call the file name as the argument. And it will run whatever you have in there. It's fairly simple. You can get your first program going with a single line of code. Simple, very powerful. It does run kind of slow compared to others, but it's not too bad, really. It uses a special format. I like to call it the indented block format, and it's a script style, so you don't have to control all your variables as much. It has good garbage collection. It's very easy to use. And you can use it to build command line interface programs, console user interface programs, graphical user interface programs. If you're not sure about those three, I have a video which has those compared. And you can also, it has its own library in there that you can import, that's a game engine as a part of it. So you can import the Pygame, and yeah, you've basically got a game engine built right into your language. So if you're interested in games, Python's a good one. If you're interested in GUI type stuff too, it can support like GTK and some of those. You can write your advanced console applications and just basic command line interface, which is a good spot to start. And that's why it's an excellent beginner language. So next up, JavaScript. It's kind of on the easier side of intermediate difficulty, but it still is using, actually that's not correct here. I have it down here as strict style. It is, it's the script style. It's going to be a scripted style language. It's interpreted. It usually runs in web browsers. You can also get like Node.js and run it that way. as a process. There's so many different things that you can do to play with JavaScript. There are sometimes other applications that will allow you to work with JavaScript in it. But it's interpreted, it's fairly slow, and yeah, the standard curly brace style, but it is a script style, so you don't have to control all your variables as you would on a strict style. And the client client side, it's usually used in client side web scripting. Yes, that's the most common place which we will see it being used. PHP, it's in the intermediate area as well, probably kind of more towards the easier side of that because it is an interpreted script language. It also uses that standard curly brace script style, and it runs very fast for an interpreted language. I'm very impressed with its speed and performance. And it has the automatic variable control, so you don't have to declare everything and do garbage collection. It has all that, just like Java and just like Python had. It's useful for building command line interface or even server-side scripting. It's got very good capability for that as well. And that seems to be where it started out with server-side scripting, but it is excellent for CLI as well. Java. Now this is definitely in the intermediate category now. And it compiles for a virtual machine. In that way, it has its pros and it has its cons. The virtual machine caters to your individual machine that you have. So you do compile a cross-platform kind of an executable, but not really because it's for the virtual machine. So you have extra steps in compiling it. You have the compilation steps that you have to go through to compile it, and then you have to go through the extra steps to run it because you have to start the virtual machine and tell that to run your Java class. It usually is a bit slow. It takes time to get that virtual machine started up. It is still kind of interpreting itself, but it is also streamlined too because it has done that pre-compilation. But I do feel like in that way that it's kind of got the worst of both as far as extra time that it takes to go from code to completion. However, I will say that it's good there that it has that virtual machine for the cross-platform capability because that class file that you produce, it can be used by the virtual machine on a Linux computer, and the Windows computers are reading that by the same standard. So I think all of the ones that we've looked at, all the ones we've looked at so far are all cross-platform. You can easily port them across from one, from Linux to Windows to, I'm not sure about Mac. I haven't dealt with Mac in years, but you can move them around. But it is strict style. It's definitely a strict style with that. Uses the standard curly brace format. So once you learn the standard curly brace format, it has a lot of stuff that's very similar all across most of the languages that use that. In this case, it does force variable declaration, but it has decent garbage collection. So it will take care of your garbage for you. Your variables that you don't clean up, it will clean them up for you. So as you use memory, it will automatically recover them. That's what garbage collection is. And it's very useful in command line user interface applications, graphical user interface applications. I haven't really seen it used in console user interface, the advanced console stuff, but basic CLI, it's got very good controls with that. That and PHP both, they're some of the better ones you can get. Python has got some to be desired in that category. It just doesn't allow good line control in Python. But it also allows for web-based applets and Android applications. Use Java a lot. Android, I've also understood that PHP is trying to get into some Android stuff. They also use Kotlin, which is not really listed in here. C and C++, but those are not really core languages for it. Doesn't really have all good libraries for Android the way Java does. Java's probably the best one. Probably right there with Kotlin. Kotlin's probably right there with it, but I think Java's been there since before Kotlin was. And it's excellent for that. So it has a wide range of uses and applications too. And it's got good controls as well, as far as not allowing your code to run away. It's like JavaScript in the sense that it works in its own kind of lockdown environment. It has a lockdown environment beyond normal applications. Most applications have as much permission as the user has that they're running as. With these guys, the virtual machine has more control on this, and JavaScript was designed for web browsers, and web browsers have their own set of stricter rules that can be used to safeguard you from better accidents. So that's Java for you. Take a look at C++. Harder difficulty than Java by quite a bit. You have extra compile commands and all that, but it does compile down to a machine code. So once you've compiled it, once you've gone through all that work to get it compiled, then it can be done as a single command, and it's therefore then it's even easier to run than the other interpreted languages. So this is the first one of that class that I've gone over, and this is not cross-platform. This, and I believe the next two, if I know what the next two were on here, they are not cross-platform. So those that compile all the way down, they're going to compile for the architecture of your processor, they're going to compile for your operating system, and they're not going to be just take it from Linux and drag and drop it onto Windows and run it. Nope. Okay, it's not going to be very good for you. Does compile, does take some time to compile. It's a little bit more complex, but it does run fast. It runs fast. The standard curly brace strict style is what we're doing with that. Yeah, so that's the very standard format and the strict style. So you've got to handle all your garbage collection, all your variable declarations, all that. But it's great with command line interface, console user interface, graphical user interface. That's like windowed stuff. Whenever I talk about GUI, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, making something that runs in a window. And CGI, that's useful for web outputs. I mentioned that for PHP. It means like to be able to pre-process a web page in the back end. So you can actually, some pages are already written as a complete file, but with these CGIs, they can generate one on the fly. So they can say, okay, it's this time of day, I'm going to change everything about my page, or whatever they decide to do, but they are dynamically producing that. And these guys are able to handle that very well, this CGI. And C, yes, this compiles as well to a machine code, so it is not cross-platform. Low level, hard difficulty, yes. Not a beginner language with that. Medium compile speed, it's faster than C++ because it's got a more limited compiler. Doesn't have as much to do, and it is very fast to run. That's why it's used. It becomes very lightweight, very fast on the executables. They'll use this when there isn't enough space to run a full C program. You can oftentimes get away with running without running a full C++ program. This is lighter weight and it'll work better for some of that stuff here. And it's got the same uses as C++ in the sense of CLI, CUI, GUI, and CGI. Yeah, and uses that standard curly brace, strict style programming. This is like C++, except for this doesn't support object-oriented programming and some other features. So it becomes very lightweight, much easier to compile. That's why it's got the better compile speed between the two and the faster running by the time it's done as well. So it gets a better compilation done in less time. And the last one on our list here is, this is also not going to be cross-platform. You're basically handwriting the compiled code is essentially what you're doing, or you're writing it very close to. If you're writing it machine code, it is what it's going to compile to. If you're writing it in assembly, it's very close to that. You're going to write it to something that would be assembled. But if you're writing machine language, it's going to be run as is. This is very low level stuff, moving stuff around bitwise inside of a processor. Very difficult, very time consuming to create these programs, especially on these 32 and 64-bit processors. Very limited use. This would be useful for like bridging between other languages and stuff like that. Just very limited. Hey, I want to write a function that's assembly, and everything else I'm going to use something else, and I'm going to link it later on. This is on the bottom of the list for a reason. Okay, definitely at the bottom of the list for that. But it is super fast for assembly whenever you do assemble it, because it's pretty much just translating your text to what the machine will know. It's translating names of the numbers that you would have entered during machine language, and then to run it, it is as lightning fast as you can get. There isn't anything faster than it, because it is the machine's language, and you're writing it directly for what it should be. And it is statement or direct machine format. And it's used for course system programs. It's not very easy to implement it for, really working with any of the other APIs, even with the operating system. This is more for like coding an operating system in or something like that. And even at that, C can code an operating system. You can code that in C. This has very few applications in today's stuff. But I just wanted to bring it out there, just to mention it. Thank you for watching.